All right, welcome back to the show. We've got Joanna Marsh here to talk a little bit about what's going on in the rail space. First half of our perspective today, we'll have Harris Lagan on in just a little bit as well. Joanna, thank you for joining us this morning. We just saw the end of the second quarter here in the U.S., and we are starting the third quarter here. Greenbrier, first company to release some results. What can you tell us about what they said about the second quarter, what that shows about their optimism heading forward?
Yeah. So, yes, Greenbrier did just release their results. They're a rail equipment manufacturer. They actually have a different calendar system. So, I think it was actually the end of their third quarter, and their fourth quarter and their fiscal year 2023 will end in August 31st. But it's interesting to hear their results because they were talking about rail car orders and how those are coming along in terms of demand and sort of, so that it gives you, even though Greenbrier is on a different calendar, it still kind of gives you a glimpse into what they see. And they're actually still seeing, steady market demand in the sense that, you have rail cars that are set to retire soon. And you also have kind of the pent up demand still, as rail service was spotty last year, and and is improving this year, but there's still some ways to go, and so as a result, Greenbrier is still seeing positive market dynamics, even though there's still a lot of macroeconomic uncertainties.
I think that this is kind of refreshing to see it from this side of things, especially as a lot of the other industry spaces are saying, we are really kind of bracing for the worst, especially if you look at the air cargo market. The truckload market's still kind of a little shaky. But when we're looking at that kind of pent up demand for manufactured products and for rail cars from Greenbrier, are we still kind of seeing this kind of this expected turnover of parts of equipment? And is that what's helping drive demand?
Yeah, that is because the rail cars, a number of them have a set life. For box cars, for instance, I think there's like 50 years or so that before they have to retire because there's just a fixed schedule that they have. So I think that definitely is helping to help prop up demand for rail cars. And of course, this is also talking about like rail car orders. So it's not necessarily buying something or buying a rail car, getting it like the next day or something. So this is also kind of companies kind of looking at what their rail equipment needs might be, in 2024 and 2025 and onward.
It's interesting to see that as well, and kind of good news and maybe a good economic sign for us, pointing to that specific space of the industry. Let's move on to our second top story of the morning. We've got some news coming out of the U.S. Senate where they are looking to reintroduce a revamped rail safety bill. We know that the first one that came through had some pretty intense scrutiny and obviously didn't make it forward the way that it was written. What's the different in this one versus that first one?
Well, I think like one big difference is actually kind of the environment that's in place right now. Rail service was concerned. So Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin introduced the rail service bill last October, and it got reintroduced last week, and of course, rail service was a big concern among shippers in 2022, and even though those rail service issues might have abated somewhat, I think the big difference between October of 2022 and this year is that there just seems to be a lot of momentum happening in terms of proposing reforms on the rail industry. Granted, for better or for worse, a lot of that was due to the February 3rd derailment of the Norfolk Southern train in East Palestine, Ohio. And so, of course, that's rail safety, which is different, of course, from rail service. But I think that putting putting the spotlight on the rail industry with that aspect related to East Palestine, and I think, in a way, because of that spotlight, you have you have this potential opportunity for rail service to be addressed. And so, what the bill is asking, it's giving it would give the Surface Transportation Board more authority to revise the common carrier obligation in terms of, because right now rail shippers argue that it's a little vague. And common carrier obligation essentially says that the freight railroads must provide service to someone who asks for it. But the rail shippers argue, what does that mean exactly? And so, we'll see how that bill moves along, or whether or not it moves along.
So currently, this new revamped bill has support from a pretty decent handful of shippers, as well as 14 of the rail unions. What do the next steps look like for it? Is that going to be lobbying and support? Will it go through committee? What's the next steps?
Yeah, I would think, it would, if there is enough momentum that, there could be, it could be discussed further in committee. And then, we'll kind of take it from there and see what happens. But as you mentioned, yes, there's also support from the unions as well, with the argument that in order to provide, good rail service, or at least adequate, sufficient rail service, you have to have enough people to be able to move things. And as you know, that was something that the rail industry struggled with, particularly, after the COVID-19 pandemic.
Still a point of hot contention. Joanna, thank you for joining us this morning. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
All right, and we'll have some more perspective